Mr. Chairman, thank you very much indeed for agreeing to do this Q&A. And before we go any further, I'd just like to make clear that the questions I'm asking today are the questions that have been received from the members of the Supporters Trust, but also from other fans as well. And we had several hundred coming in. So, and also just make clear, you said I can ask whatever I like, and you may not be able to answer everything, but so I plan to do that. Yeah. Okay, so I think it's been nearly 4 seasons since you joined. How do you think it's gone?
First 3 seasons, we were very happy with progress. This last season, everyone in the club, I'm sure as all the fans are, disappointed as to where we've ended up. Clearly we've got, as we record this, 10 games to go. We very much hoped we were going to be at the other end of the table, pushing for promotion, rather than being in a position in which we're not safe from the drop yet, and where we're realistically, if we have a good finish, we're going to be mid-table. So at the end of the day, for a football club, we're in the business of putting a team on the pitch and wanting to do well. So we have to accept that we haven't got to where we wanted to when we first came in. Having said that, I think that the first 3 seasons showed great progress, and who knows what would have happened but for COVID, because I think that COVID has had a dramatic impact, not just on society as a whole, but obviously on us as a club. We've missed the fans incredibly, and I'm absolutely sure that the results on the pitch at the end of last season would have been better if we'd had our crowds in, both home and away, because they've been absolutely magnificent for us. And it's a key, when you're a big club like Forest, with this magnificent support, it makes a huge difference, and we're all desperate to get the fans back.
In general terms, off the pitch now, so rather than where we are in the table, off the pitch, how do you feel about what the club has done off the pitch? Are you happy with the strides the club has made in that area?
I think obviously it's always difficult when you have these sorts of discussions, but I think we need to put things into context as to where we were when we first came in. I think the club was not in a great place when we came in. There was a lot of disenchantment with fans. I think the club ownership had lost interest. The level of commitments obviously are not there when you're looking to sell a club. And there weren't structures in place. So when we first came in, things were not great, and I think we inherited a squad which had no confidence, which had progressively performed worse and worse in terms of certainly league position. And as you know, just before we came in, we had the situation in which the club survived on the last day of the season on goal difference. So when you look at that, put that into context, we've now got to the position in which I think, but for COVID, we were on a very positive linear progression over those first 3 seasons. We were on course for playoffs. And not many clubs turn around the position that we were in, where we had nearly got relegated, to then virtually make the playoffs in 3 seasons. That's quite an achievement on the pitch. But off the pitch, it was extraordinary. I mean, I think that the statistics are that we increased attendances by 30%. We had record season card numbers. We were, I think, heading from an 18 million turnover business to a 27 million pound turnover business. And I think we were pretty pleased with where we'd gone with fans, our relationship with fans, and our relationship with the community. And I think that we had gone from being a club which didn't engage with its community to being one which did. And I know that we'll cover many of these issues, no doubt, during the course of the questioning. But overall, I think it was a positive change. but we are obviously committed in getting to the final place where we really want to be, which is to have this club in the Premier League, where I'm sure we all believe it belongs, and I think everybody else in football thinks it belongs.
We had quite a few questions from people about the senior management of the club. Can you say a bit about the roles and the areas of responsibilities amongst the most senior people?
Yeah.
So I think to put this into context, when we first came in, obviously we had a situation in which there wasn't much in terms of structure at the club. When I was approached with a quite remarkable phone call that I took, which out of the blue more or less said, would you like to be chairman of Nottingham Forest? I went and I met the owner, who is a very impressive man in all respects. And we spoke about what our vision was for the club. And I said to him that I obviously would be honoured to take up the role. Forest is one of those clubs which, when I was growing up as a kid, everybody loved, and I'm not sure that Forest fans actually quite appreciate that everyone's second team. And Clough was just such an extraordinary figure.
Yeah.
And I think people can forget that certainly in the late 70s, early 80s, he was probably the unofficial leader of the opposition as well.
Yeah.
Within the country. He was so popular, he was a winner, and everybody loved Forest. So to be asked to have the opportunity to be the chairman was an extraordinary event in my life, and one that I feel incredibly proud about and honoured. And we met, we spoke about where we wanted to go, the sort of club that we were looking to build, and it was one which would be in connection with fans, in connection with the community, and obviously one that would be successful on the pitch as well. So that then dictated the sort of structure that we wanted to put into place. So when we first came in, the idea was I would be chairman. I mean, as you will appreciate, there's no sort of textbook on exactly how you should structure a club. Lots of clubs have different structures, depends on the attitude of the owner, is the owner local, etc., etc. And the model that we came up with was that I would be chairman, something between a non-exec chairman and an exec chairman. I would deal with most of the external relationships with the politicians and the community, all of the regulatory matters, so interaction with the EFL, PFA and LMA and people like that. And we would have a CEO in Yanis, who would have a good connection with the owner. Historically, the owner can trust on the meat and vegetables, so to speak, of the club.
Yeah.
And so we have that model, and then obviously we hired Johnny Owen to come in. The idea for Johnny was that he knew the community well. He lived here. He knew all the key people amongst the supporters. The idea was to have, so when we came in and where we are now, so obviously got the QC who's experienced in various legal matters to deal with that side of the club.
Yeah.
We have Yanis, who has the confidence of the owner. And
just on Yanis, he was known to Mr. Marinakis previously.
He worked with him at Olympiakos in particular.
In a similar role?
In a similar role.
Right.
And then with Johnny to do obviously Johnny's obviously got a great media career himself, so to advise us on that aspect. So the idea was that we would have a board of people who were committed, who would be here for the long term.
Yeah.
And that's the structure that we've adopted, and we think it covers all the main bases.
Yeah.
And we will never rest on our laurels, and if we think things can be improved or individuals can come in to improve the structure, we won't shy away from those decisions. But we think it's the right structure for this owner and this football club.
You mentioned Mr. Marinakis. A name that we don't hear a lot of is Mr. Kaminakis. And as I understand it, there's an 80-20 ownership. Is Mr. Kaminakis involved at all? Mr.
Kaminakis is very supportive. He comes to a few games. He's a great guy, and he obviously knows Mr. Marinakis from They got businesses in common back in Greece, and he's very supportive, and he doesn't play the leading role that Mr. Marinakis does, but he's very supportive.
We did get some questions about your own role and it having
Yeah.
changed in some way. Is that the case? And if so, how has it changed?
Well, the context for when I first came in, the idea was that I would be a little bit more non-exec than exec. The idea was I'd keep a bit of the legal practice going.
Right.
And I think the general idea was the better model might be if I'm partly away from Nottingham, and that I would come in more in a sort of overview type role.
Right.
That lasted sort of a few hours by the time we actually got here, and we realised that there was so much to be done, and so there was a change at that stage, and we all realised, well, at that particular stage for the club, we needed to commit more hours. So I've effectively moved to Nottingham, and that level of commitment, and probably more of my role, you would have described it more as being an exec chairman at that time. I'm still very much in the club, and the owner has backed us incredibly, even during the pandemic, and that has meant that my role has not changed substantially. I'm still here on a very regular basis. I'm in Nottingham the vast majority of the time, and we're all still totally committed. Now, what happens as we move through the future will be dictated by circumstances in the club. But one thing I can say 100% is that the club will always come first, and any structural changes will be dependent on that. And we'll just have to see where we get to in the future. But I want to make people absolutely aware I'm here and I'm 100% committed. And I'm very proud and I'm enjoying it and I'm delighted to be here. And that's the position. We have Francois, who's essentially head of recruitment, is the nature of that role for us. We don't have a director of football in the full-blooded continental sense, so the manager always takes the lead on those particular issues. And recruitment will be it's a collective process. So Francois will be there with some of the scouts, and they'll come up with the technical data. They'll be scouting around the world, and obviously we've got that huge advantage of having the expertise and the understanding within Olympiakos in terms of the European and global model, what's out there. And then there will be discussions about who should be brought in. The manager will always play the lead role in identifying where the gaps are, what's needed. And we will always operate the traditional English method that the manager will always have the final say. One of the things that I did when I was at the bar, one of my favourite clients of all time was Kevin Keegan, and Kevin was not only famous for being on the losing side in the 1980 European Cup final, he was also, and obviously had a very, very distinguished career at all levels, but he's also the claimant in the leading legal case on what is unacceptable interference at a football club when I acted for him when we sued Newcastle United and won. And there was lots of expert evidence in that case about where the line is drawn, and I'm absolutely 100% satisfied that throughout my time at this football club, we have always been the right side of the line. Okay. As you'll appreciate, there's always debate, particularly when a manager passes on out of the club, and often there'll be stories which suggest that lines were crossed. It's just not the case. We do try and learn from criticism, and I want to stress that I'm actually one of those people who welcomes criticism. I think criticism is a good thing. I'd far rather be criticised than have oleaginous support, unqualified support out there. I appreciate the picture that's tried to be painted. I don't think it's a fair or accurate one. As chairman, I have to stand back. I've got to look at the whole picture, take into account what I know, what my instincts are. And in any, if you're a trial lawyer, which is my background, you have to make your, first of all, you've got to look for facts rather than opinions. Facts are more important. Secondly, you have to look at the whole picture. So your story that you tell in a court case has to make sense not only at the individual narrow level, but also on the big picture level. And I'm entirely satisfied that when you look at all of these matters, the football side of this club is run very, very well and very professionally. And what gives me the faith in that is because we have attracted Chris Hughton as our manager, first of all, who's an outstanding candidate, famed for his preparation and knowledge. And the thing about football is it's a very open system for the people within it. So there's a lot of transparency between clubs. Players will talk to other players. So I'm fully satisfied that by getting Chris, that is the biggest sign you can have that things are going well and are well run.
Moving on from that then, sort of a bit of a wider question really. Would you accept that there have been mistakes made by the senior management at all?
Yes, and repeatedly.
Yeah. Do you want to let me rephrase that?
Well, we're always going to make mistakes. I don't think making mistakes. Well, first of all, it's something you can't avoid. Secondly, what's important in life is when you make the mistakes, you learn from them.
Yeah.
I appreciate you're not asking me about. Did we get something wrong about a photocopier deal or something like that? I appreciate that isn't the direction of travel of your question. At the end of the day, we are in the results business, and I'm not going to sit here and do the administrative law defence and say, look, at the time the decisions were taken, they're all reasonable based on the facts of that time. And I'm not going to say nobody identified that or suggested that the summer business just past was catastrophically bad, or that we wouldn't score many goals or whatever. That the reality is we haven't scored the goals. Our league position is incredibly disappointing, and we have to accept that that's not good enough. We are in the results business. Now, then working out where you've actually gone wrong and how to correct it is a little bit more complicated. And again, as chairman, I have to look at it, and I've got a recruitment team that in the previous summer's window had an outstanding result. And you have to, as with any employment relationship, you've got to look at the proper picture. You've got to look at it in the round. I think if we are guilty of one thing which is significant, I think it would be that we've been perhaps too inclined to put short-termism first. We have had some stages where we've been very close, I think, to getting where we want to get to.
What do you mean by short-termism?
In terms of player turnover,
Okay.
I think there's been if we had our time again, I think we would have taken it a little bit slower. Not quite as slow as some people think we should, by the way. I respect the view about building over a number of seasons. I think that is a model which itself has some weaknesses within it. We need to strike the right balance. Players are actually incredibly resilient. One of the things that you learn quite early on is that players are able to fit into teams and systems quite quickly. But I think that would be our big mistake, is that we perhaps rush things. Other areas where we clearly got it wrong were, I think, in relation to our communication with the fans once COVID hit. In mitigation, I think that we were all in completely new territory. I mean, the general approach we tried to take is not to talk too much, and to try and prove progress by what's actually happening, so people can actually see it in terms of a full stadium. And obviously last season, a team that was competing, and to see us in connection with our community. Obviously all of that broke down with COVID, and we should have been a bit more on the front foot, I think, in terms probably of communication with fans. But we obviously needed to do better there, and indeed, I think the purpose of this Q&A, one of the issues that came out of it that we weren't aware of at the time, was that there was some concern about the way we were interacting with fans. So we listened to that, and this whole process, which I hope will be repeated, and we believe will be repeated, is a reflection of that. So more supporters can hear our responses to the questions in this more direct way. And another area where the criticism really worked was, I think we got the season ticket issues wrong, and both yourselves and Forza came up with ideas that we listened to and we were able to change. So I think that's an example of where we've made mistakes and you've helped us correct them.
Okay, so the next area I want to talk about, I've got quite a few questions around finance and commercial. And obviously when we originally put the questions out to the members and to other fans, the club accounts hadn't been published. And so some of these questions haven't been specifically asked by the fans, but I'm pretty sure they would be. So they're very recently published. Can you talk about those in general, and then I'll have some specifics about them and about the situation they point to?
Yeah, in general terms, obviously they've been partly hit by COVID, not the full picture. So that it's qualified to some extent. What they show is, I think we're on the verge of record turnover. So that was all positive and encouraging. The reality is, Andy, they're a not unusual set of accounts for a club which is in our position, which is we are a big club in the Championship that needs and its fans deserve for their support to be competing in terms of expenditure and investment in a way which enables us to hopefully push for promotion. And this is a set of accounts which I think is typical fairly for a club in that sort of position. One point I would make in particular is that the owner has recently written down the 20 million debt to equity, and I appreciate that some have said, well, that's tidying up.
Can you explain what that means? Because not everybody who's going to be watching this understands it.
Well, in very simple terms, what it means is there isn't the 20 million of debt hanging around the club, and it's been invested into equity. So in other words, in order to get anything back, the owner would have to be able to show that the valuation of shares has gone up effectively. That's what it means. Well, why is it important? So in the short run, if you take a very narrow snapshot, the cynic might say, well, he's not going to get that money back anyway. The club isn't going to pay off those loans. So there's no real change. It's just an accounting technique. That, I think, is very unfair, because the crucial reality is that whenever a club is sold, because lots of these clubs make losses, as you know, and the way in which an owner extracts value when they wish to sell a club is by saying, I've got all these loans attached to this club. You need to pay me a price which enables me to agree to give up those loans. So the key aspect of what the owner has done and what it illustrates to fans is that the owner is totally committed to the club. He is not looking to sell it under any circumstances. And that is the position in which we are in. So we are fortunate to have an owner who is totally committed to us. And indeed, one of the key issues which comes up at EFL discussions, because as you know, we're in constant turmoil about how to control expenditure, which I know we can come on to in due course. But one of the key issues is to how we have a set of rules which requires owners not to load their clubs with debt, but to do exactly what Mr. Marinakis has done on this particular occasion. So I believe that is a significant element of the whole picture. Another area where I think we feel perhaps some of the commentary is wrong is in relation to where we stand on FFP or P&S, whichever way you want to look at it. We are well within the FFP limits, and that will actually show, in particular because we took the tough decision in relation to Matty to sell, and Yanis got an absolutely fantastic deal on that. I think one of the rare occasions in football where you can genuinely say all parties had a great deal. The reality is that we, because of that sale, and bizarrely, when you look at COVID, what the impact of COVID has had, but actually the losses are much lower for the next set of accounts than they were for the accounts which are now public. And that means, because FFP is done over a 3-year rolling period, we are not at the limits. We are comfortably under them, and we have some headroom. In relation to sustainability for Nottingham Forest, which I think obviously our fans are most concerned for, I'm absolutely satisfied that for the short and medium term, this is entirely sustainable. The reason it's sustainable is because the owner is fully committed. He is a man of means and substance. He loves football. He loves this club. He's committed to it. And indeed, the loan write-off gives you a graphic illustration of the fact that he's not looking to sell. He is determined to make this club a success. And at every turn, he has been superb for us. And he's probably the one person who's got the greatest right to be annoyed that his investment hasn't recouped what we should have done for him. But even now, in a pandemic, he's been investing heavily in the community trust. He's continued all of those elements. He's supported us, supported the manager in the transfer market. He's been absolutely excellent. So in terms of the short to medium term for Nottingham Forest, absolutely, please, I don't want the fans to have any worry whatsoever. And if any of us thought there was any risk in that area, we would say it immediately. For Forest, I think you can definitely say the foreseeable future is absolutely fine. It may be, of course, that we obviously hope that we'll be ending up in the Premier League in the not too distant future. But I don't think there is any risk to Forest at this moment in time. In terms of the future, who knows where we'll be in 5-10 years? I don't know. We all need now to have proper and open discussion about where our game goes. But so many of the issues that you come up against, whether it be salary caps, P&S, FFP, whatever, it all relates in reality to the unfair distribution throughout the game. And the pyramid is fundamental to where we are. It's absolutely fundamental to football that a club has the opportunity to get promoted and the opportunity to get relegated. That's absolutely sacrosanct. And we need to make that pyramid a realistic possibility for clubs. It is no point technically having relegation and promotion if all we turn into is a revolving door where the same clubs are going up and going down in respective seasons. Every club has to look after its own interests by law. Every club director has a fiduciary duty to their own club. And one of the problems that we've got is it means that whoever is sitting in the relevant seat at the relevant time adopts their perspective that they have. So you're quite right in saying that some clubs in the Premier League are going to look out for their interests. They're obliged to. And often their individual interests will not reflect the overall interests of the game, by definition. That's where we are. In relation to what we try and do as a club, is we try and be cooperative. We try and support all the measures that the Championship tries to take in relation to cost controls. We are one of the broad groups of clubs that does that. We consider there is a moral dimension to complying with the rules. Just to confirm our commitment, there's not only the sort of the moral and the integrity of the league level to it, but also if you breach, you risk serious sanction. and which I know that this club is aware of historically, and we just do not want to go there. It's an article of faith for us. What is annoying is when you see some of the results where you think clubs that have breached fought all the way to try and avoid sanction, then get a light sanction at the end of it. And it is frustrating, and people don't realise the impact of the tough decisions that we have to make when we sell players. And I know it's difficult for people to realise this, but we have a lot of sympathy for the position that some people say, where they say, well, why are you selling our young talent or whatever? I agree 100%. We don't want to do that, but we're forced to do it by the system, effectively. And one of the things that annoys me the most about the unfair distribution within the leagues is that if you're a championship club, even like Nottingham Forest, a very, very big club in the championship, we are not able to properly develop and grow players. That this is a huge problem for us. As soon as our players begin to show real talent, they get on the radars of the Premier League clubs who are already hoarding talent, and they can attract those players, they can turn their minds and their heads, they have the resources to be able to attract them, and we're in a position in which, in order to keep within our financial sustainability rules, we have to let those players go, and it's not right. It's an unfair system. But so we have huge sympathy with that argument that that's the way football clubs should be allowed to run, but the current environment doesn't enable that to happen, and we are not alone in thinking that. So what we have to do, Andy, is when the time comes that we have to sell a player, we have to make sure we get the absolute best deal for them that we possibly can.
How do you feel about the progress of the commercial side of the business? And I know that I've got the figures up from 5.2 million to 6.9 in the last 2 seasons. However, even that 6.9, around 7 million figure puts us only about halfway up the championship now. As a Forest fan, and all Forest fans would say this, think we're a big club, we've got huge attendance, everybody knows that. How do you feel about the performance of the commercial side of the business?
Well, I think we've made progress. I mean, as I said earlier, qualified success. We've made some progress, but we still need to do a lot better, and we want to do a lot better. The huge issue we have as a club, as I'm sure you appreciate, is the lack of facilities within the stadium, and I know we're going to come on and talk about why we need to improve that moving forward. But I think David Cook and his team have done a great job up until now working with what we've got. And you've obviously seen improvements. We've invested certainly in the ticket office, in our retail offering, and in hospitality. But there's always a tension between trying to get in as much money as you possibly can on the one hand, in the context, of course, of a business which is making losses. So every pound, I hope the fans realise, every pound that they pay into the club is going into the club. It's not going into the owner's pocket or anything of that nature. So we need to try and maximise that. But at the same time, we have as an article of faith that we want our ticket prices, which is the key to it at the end of the day, to be as competitive as we possibly can. We believe that the right policy is to try and get people in the stadium. That's got to be the way to go. And that means that we don't, we could have pushed the limits, could probably, particularly with the demand last season, we probably could have increased prices, and some people within the club, it's their job to say, I think we can charge a little bit more. And it's my job and other people's jobs to say, no, let's charge a bit less, because it's crucial we get people in. It's crucial that we get young people into the stadium as well. And as you know, that we gave reduced prices for some of the slightly older groups as well, as a recognition of some of the generational issues. that apply and the challenges there. So we have to try and strike a balance between getting the money in on the one hand and making sure that football is not priced beyond people that want to come. It's a huge priority for us to get fans back, not only because it's a moral issue. I think we feel that we had a pretty good case for being further up the pecking order for relaxation in the middle of last year. It's crucial that we get the fans back. A view was taken in relation to the discount that obviously season ticket holders are very important to us. But I think the view was taken that rather than just having the blanket discount, that it would be reflected in specific offers at specific times. And again, it's just one of those classic areas where a commercial decision has to be taken. We hope we got the balance right, but when you have lots of offers, specific offers, that's when the discounts apply rather than just being across the board. So that was a commercial decision taken. I hope people will understand the context in which we're operating, where we are making the losses, and at the end of the day, there does have to be some restraint in order to enable us to get the right balance of monies in.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Those are all the questions I've got in the first section, but just to, if we can sort of tag what's coming. Next time around, we're going to talk about questions relating to the development of the City Ground, and then questions also about footballing strategy in the academy, and also questions around the work of the club in the community.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.